Welcome, everybody, to that Yearbook podcast with those yearbook people, plus the one that's been missing. And I'm back.
Yay.
Yay.
I'm back for a while, I hope. And welcome, Sabrina and Jim, and Danielle,
Hello.
our podcast leader. So this is a big day for us.
Big day, big day.
Absolutely.
It's that crazy time of year when pages are done and they're going in and things get set in stone and the book really gets rolling. So we want to, give you some tips, and we want to get you fired up, and we want you to draw closer as a staff instead of kind of driving each other crazy at this time of year. So this is a time really to do some checks on, what your staff morale is and how you can build people up and make them feel great about the yearbook process. In my day, way back when, Mike?
Back when the Pilgrims landed on
That's
that rock.
right. Yeah. I knew Squanto, good buddy of mine.
Yeah.
We were thankful for everything back then, but now's really time to set the tone to get you through December and on to the big push in January.
Absolutely.
Jim, I have one question. When you planted those fish below the corn, did that really work? I just wondered if it
It
really
was
worked.
so good. I'm still doing it. You should see the corn out in my backyard. It's amazing.
Okay.
To this day, success.
day.
To this day, you're putting fish underneath your corn. Okay.
Boom, Vegas goes right
It's a
up.
Thanksgiving tradition in the Jordan household.
That's right.
Most of us put up our trees, our Christmas trees. Jim plants fish underneath corn.
That's
I
right.
mean, to each their own, right? Everybody's got their thing.
Yeah.
Yes, today we want to talk about proofing and editing, and not just in stories, but in spreads, and how important that is, because and I think the biggest part of this to me, especially as former advisors, all of us were advisors at some point, like I wanted the product that my staff put out there to be credible. Like I wanted people to trust that what we put in there was correct. It was accurate. It had been checked. It had been proved. And when there are errors all over the book, you kind of lose that credibility. And it could be little things like spelling errors, or, somebody's grade is wrong or their title is wrong. And those things happen, right? Like they're going to happen no matter what. You could be the best proofreader in the world. There will be errors in your book at the end of the day. It's just that's kind of the part of the business. It's so much that you're having to proofread.
Periods,
so much
question marks. Yeah.
Yes. In such a short amount of time that there's going to be stuff that goes wrong for sure, but it's our job to make sure that we try to minimize that as much as possible so that the product that we're putting out there is proofed as much to perfection as we possibly can, so that people still trust what you're putting out there and they deem that to be a credible source of information. So It's a big topic to cover today.
And greatness in yearbooks is really found in the details. I mean, I that's one thing I stressed in my advising career is you've got to be meticulous on where things are spaced, and are the names all correct, and do we have the information right? There's an old quote, if I was doing this as a session, God is in the details, so the important stuff, don't let it slip through the cracks. Make it all be consistent and right and true and all that stuff. And your book is going to be better. I guarantee it.
Yeah. And this goes for if you're a big journalistic book wanting to win awards, or if you're just trying to make a great book for your school, you don't care about the journalistic part, let's say, like that's not something you're really focused on right now, or maybe you're a middle school book, or you're even doing a book for an elementary school. Accuracy and proofing and all of those things still matter, right? We still want people's names to be spelled correctly. We want them to be in the right class. We want their grades and titles to be correct. We want things to be accurate and proofed well. So no matter what level of yearbooking you're at, this is still a big, important topic for everybody involved.
And there are so many ways to do it correctly. Getting your kids in a circle and each kid has one job and a red pencil or a purple pen, it doesn't matter. but they have one job and they do it, and you make sure that it's done well, that you can pull that off, and you can rest at ease that the book is, or the newspaper is going to look perfect, or not perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be as close to.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
let's begin by talking about how can we build morale in this proofing process. You know, we're getting to crunch time. How do we bring the staff together? You are a cheese ball.
Always cheese ball and animal crackers for sure. I mean, one of the I think biggest things is making sure that there is, if you have a process for feedback, if you have a system for this kind of stuff, that people know and expect it, and there's a method to the madness, I think that always helps. Like what we do when we're creating stuff, when you're writing a story, I remember in college writing a story and it looked like my professor had just bled all over that paper. Like I sat in his office and I'm like, I thought this was really good. And it's just covered in red ink. You know, like there are those moments, what you create is very personal. Like when you're designing a spread, when you're writing a story, that is very personal. So sometimes taking that criticism, especially when you're not expecting it, can be really tough. So if there's a process, if there's a method to that, if everybody knows that this is just a part of what we do in this classroom, then you learn to expect it, and it's more of a safe space for that kind of criticism, and that makes it easier for people to give the criticism they need to give, and also easier for people to take the criticism they need to hear in a much more positive way.
If it's consistent and ongoing throughout the year, from the beginning of the year, the editing process, and everybody sits down and understands their job, no feelings are going to get hurt. Now, there's one year when my kids spelled chocolate and the book came in with it, and they spelled it with a K. And the book, I was not there, but I still took the blame for it. I had already gone on to working for the yearbook company, and they spelled chocolate with a K. And I looked at them and I said, well, did you guys edit like you were supposed to? And they said, no, we just edited our own pages. I said, well, there you go. Mm-hmm. Don't let that drop.
And you said it earlier, Sabrina, the idea of the editors need to create, and the advisor too, a safe space for editing. Yeah. We all have to trust each other. The goal is to make the story be the best it can be, to make the spread as beautiful it can be. And we have to have that, interchange of, we're working on this together. It's not a personal thing. We can always make it better. And that's the one big difference between an English essay or an art project and yearbook. It really can always be a little bit better. We can work on it, we can refine it, and we kind of just run out of time. So develop in your staff that we're here to make this the best it can be, and to let go the personal part and work together on that. Create that safe space.
I put them sitting next to somebody that was good, and they fed off each other. And spelling, if you saw my text lately, you would think Mike's not good at spelling.
Your text forever, Mike.
Not lately. Always. Not lately. Yeah,
this is not new. This is nothing.
I was just going to say, I think part of creating that safe space is taking some time for like those team building activities we've talked about. And I know you guys know what they are, but like part of having that safe space and being able to take criticism and give criticism freely and feel comfortable doing it is because you have a good relationship with those people on your staff already. And part of that just comes from like having fun with them. The more you have fun, the more you play games, the more they get to know you and like you outside of that moment, the better that moment, that critiquing and proofing and editing moment is going to be. So sometimes we talk about all these fun and games and team building and culture, and we're like, yeah, that's all good, but like for real though, these are the moments where that stuff actually pays off, and it feels like it's a waste of time sometimes. Like we have so much to do, why are we playing games? because when it comes to giving criticism to somebody, they need to know that this is not the only time they've ever heard from you. They're talking to you, they've had fun with you, they've played games with you. Now you're giving them some feedback, and they're much more apt to take it well when you've had that fun time in addition.
So let's talk a little bit about, first of all, what's the difference between editing and proofing? And when does this happen? What's the sequence of events with proofing and editing?
Do you believe that editing comes first or proofing comes? I kind of think editing comes first because I want to know what the story is about or who it's about. I want to know all the details of the story. So editing is where we're going to put in changes to words and phrases and sentences. Proofing is where we're going to fix the spelling, the punctuation, the grammar.
Yeah, I think of like proofing as like the final check. But
Yeah.
editing should be something that should be happening. Like Mike, you just said, like editing should be happening all the time. I think that's where sometimes I was actually just talking to school the other day, and this editor was so self-aware that she had like waited till the very end to critique this person's spread and their story and their design. And so by the time they're ready to make all these changes, this staffer has poured hours and hours and hours into creating this. Then to have somebody come in and say, yeah, none of this is working. So now that's frustrating. Like if you're the staffer that poured all that time and like, why didn't somebody tell me this sooner that I was going down a wrong path, you know? So I think the editing process is first, but it has to happen early and often. Like that has to be just part of your daily, weekly process is you're checking and editing and correcting things as they're being created, not something that just happens at the very, very end when we're ready to publish.
And this is where I like
and
the
Walsworth
model.
has a lot of good resources for you. We've got a proofing sheet, we've got an editing sheet, all that stuff. They're really, really good to get everybody on the same page. But
also with the editing part, this is the thing where I like the model where there are multiple editors working with small groups of students so that everybody is getting talked to, copies are being discussed almost every day. Because the worst thing that can happen is, like Sabrina was saying, big old story written, hours put into it, and then an editor comes in and dumps on it and basically says, start over again. That should never happen. Sometimes some staffs wait until the proofing should be starting to do the editing, and that should never happen.
Yes, exactly. Editing shouldn't come after everything is done. It should be a part of the work process. So checking in every day with your staffers. Hey, let me see that story. How's it coming along? Like, hey, and your staffers, especially you editors out there, your leaders, they might say, oh, it's not done yet. Like, that's okay. It doesn't have to be done. Let me just see what you have, you know? Or like, hey, I'm working on the spread. Well, it's not finished yet. I don't want you to see it. Well, let me see what you're doing with it and let's talk about what the plan is. And that way, if they are heading in a wrong path, you can catch it early on and redirect them before they've gotten too far in. But like Mike said, have a checklist for these things. And that way, sometimes that takes the pressure off of you as the editor, because they, as the staffer, know in advance what you expect of them. It's all out there in writing. Like you put that out there for them up front in a checklist so they know what they should be working on. And then you don't have to nitpick little things. It's all on that sheet. So everybody's on the same page. It's a great way to make sure that expectations are communicated clearly when you have a proofing checklist there to look for things like grammar and spelling, alignment on your spread, style, and also great for helping keep things cohesive on your pages. So everybody knows this is what our style expectations are.
And this is a great time to use Google Docs where you can track changes, and the editor and the writer can be having a dialogue on change and editing outside of the school days. And then you can really track where it started and where it ended up. And that's just a great tool to keep everybody on track.
Absolutely. And then one of the other things I know that, like, as we're looking at all of these things and editing as we go, part of that process is always printing stuff out and getting it off the screen so that we can see it nice and large, or even putting it up on the projector so it's nice and large in front of the classroom. There are so many things, especially when I see people working on Chromebooks. Those all those screens are so tiny. It's like trying to edit something on your phone. Like it's so tiny. That's not conducive for being able to catch things, So I think Jim said earlier, having multiple eyes on stuff because you're all looking for different things, or you're editing for different things. Like Mike said, everybody's got a different colored pen and they're editing for different types of things. That's great. But also printing them out and taking time to really look at stuff as a group so you can see what it's going to look like in print sometimes helps you catch more errors, and it could be design errors, it could be layout things, and it can even be writing stuff because your eyes are just going to see it differently when it's not on a screen. Did y'all have stuff like that you did in your classrooms, like printing things out, looking at them?
But we haven't said this yet, and I'm going to say it right now. The number one thing you must do in the proofing process, run spell check, please. Run spell check. I cannot believe the number of stories I've read where they didn't even bother to run the spell check in Word or InDesign or Walsworth's program, whatever. Just get the spelling right. It's really pretty easy. And that would work, Mike, that would work on emails too, if you'd like to just run a spell check once in a while. I learned it from you.
And also, what are you thinking about ChatGPT running the story through there at the beginning and end of a story?
Oh, absolutely. I've been using ChatGPT
Jim's been all over it lately
as an idea generator.
Yeah.
And give it a shot, see what it does, and then decide. Talk it over with your advisor and let your advisor know you're doing it. And just
might give you a new angle.
It might give you a new angle. What I've been doing lately with ChatGPT is running theme ideas through it.
Right.
And give me 50 spin-offs of this particular theme, and it's really amazing. Sometimes you go, oh, that's an even better theme. So put it in there and see what happens. And I'd probably put it in the colophon to say we've used ChatGPT to edit some of the stories, those kind of things, let people know. But it's a tool. Use it.
Yep, absolutely. But yeah,
don't
print those things, get
caught
them, or go ahead.
Depending on it.
No. Yeah. And don't use it to write your story initially. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a good check on things, but not to actually write the story for you. You write your stories. They're yours. But yeah, and so after you printed some of that stuff, I know like sometimes our book would come in and we would see things scaled bigger and all of a sudden it would look so weird. Like we didn't know that was going to be that big, so printing things out, putting them on the projector screen, really taking a look at stuff. Even as a group, sometimes I think to get the rest of the staff to have that bird's eye view and see how the whole book is really coming together helps everybody kind of get on the same page, make some of the critiquing and criticism that you're giving and the proofing part a little bit easier when they can see the whole book coming together and not just like their individual spread that they're working on. But then there's a whole other part of this where I think bringing the editing and the proofing part together as a group helps. Like, for example, if we tell people, we need to use correct like quote attribution, like we want our quotes to be attributed correctly, and you put that on someone's feedback, but you never show them what that looks like. You never explain to them what that looks like. That's a problem. So showing people, like getting everybody together as a group and even editing spreads together as a group so that you're showing them how to make some of these changes and where your expectations are, I think makes a big difference too, because now everybody's on the same page. When you say you want your quotes to be attributed correctly, they know what you mean. And they know all of those little nitpicky things that you might be looking for when you go to edit a spread. So getting things together and showing them what you mean by proofing, I think makes a big difference.
Yeah, modeling is huge. You need to show them how it's done. And again, to develop that safe space where, you might do a model editing and proofing session with an editor and someone that's willing to, take the risk. And then you can kind of debrief, was that too harsh? what was helpful, what did you see with the whole staff watching. I mean, I think that makes a big difference. We used proofing and editing circles always before we sent them in, and we got a lot of good feedback that way. But you have to be careful. You have to keep them small. Sometimes we made them too big, and you have to really be aware of the students that are good at it.
And Jim, what would they like? What would they do? Like, did everybody proof for something different? Am I looking for spelling and you're looking for names and you're looking for layout? Like, what did that look like?
We would do it all different ways. We could split it up like that. Sometimes people would look at everything, but we'd print them out in full size. And then when you got done proofing it, you'd sign it, and they were usually on desks, and you'd move to your left to the next one, sign it, and make your changes that you saw there. That's really the best for proofing because it goes pretty quickly. But that had to be done before we would send anything. And let me say this, another thing that was just great for us, we had a proofing editor. We had somebody that was in charge of making sure this process happened, because you get caught in deadline time and then you wind up sending stuff that's not really ready to go. And then that goes back to setting up the timeline, of when's the story done, when does the editing have to be done, when are we going to proof it, and then when we're going to send it. You have to build all that time into the process.
That's a great point. Like, know when your deadlines are. And just because your deadline might be Tuesday the 18th, this process should be happening not on Tuesday the 18th. Give yourself, set that deadline way ahead of time, and then give yourself a week or 2 weeks or something like that to go through that final process so that you've got time, you're not rushed. And like Jim was saying, that's multiple eyes viewing every spread. So if it's just you and one other person, after a while, your eyes start to glaze over. You know what you're reading. You've probably read it a few times already. You're going to miss stuff. But when you've got everybody's eyes looking at stuff, hopefully with that many people's eyes on that spread, you're going to catch almost all of the major things that you would want, before you send something off to print.
Jim, I agree with you about keeping the proofing portion small. But what about like at the beginning of the book, the opening copy? And I think that you bring in the entire staff to sit around the circle, read the story, read the copy out loud, and everybody has input, or they are allowed input.
Yeah.
Because there can be people that are sitting on Easter eggs of magic, and they're hard-boiled eggs. And they might have some great input to that story.
That's right.
Definitely. And I think the whole, the old school critique sandwich of positive, negative, positive is never a bad thing to fall down on. Like, if you're not used to giving feedback, especially as an editor or an advisor or something, start with something good. Hey, you did really great here. This part needs some work. We're struggling with getting, the formula, the writing formula, right? Like lead quote, transition quote, so let's work on that. But I did really like this quote that you got, and it was really good and had a lot of excitement and energy to it. So always that positive, negative, positive sandwich, always never a bad thing. You can't ever go wrong in that department. Especially, you don't want that person to feel like we're just nitpicking a million different things and they're just being rained on with negativity. So giving that positive stuff is always helpful too.
Yeah. And remember, editors, this is kind of for you. We're always trying to build trust. You want to set up a situation where your staff's going to want to listen to you, and they're going to want to take your advice and make their stuff better. If you're too harsh, if you don't act like you're really interested in them, it's going to really damage your whole staff. And, the big picture here is the yearbook's important, but we want you to become, great leaders, great citizens, people that, influence our world. And by being able to critique in that way, to be able to help people, it's going to really make all the difference in the world. So what are some of the things we want people to remember just out of this little session today? What are some of the takeaways?
I think one of the biggest takeaways to me is always two things. One, it's early and often, right? This is not something that comes at the very end. You should have a process for editing and critiquing throughout and constantly looking at stuff. It also saves you time. So when you do get to those like proof circles, like Jim, you were talking about, that part should be pretty easy. It should be like one or two like little things here or there, but by then you've usually caught all the big stuff. And it saves you time later on. And I also think the most common problem, I think we talked about this with leadership stuff too, was, editing with people, not doing it for them. So like, don't go into someone's story, and if you realize there are issues, just rewrite it for them. That's not the answer. That's not editing. It might feel like editing because you're going in and fixing, but when you do it for them, they've learned nothing. They feel like they wasted their time. They feel like they didn't do a good job. Whereas if you edit with them, if you show them like we were talking about, and you give them some positive feedback, but you also are showing them, they feel like they're learning, they're growing, they're going to try harder. And that's going to be a win for everybody. So I think there's a lot of good things that you can build with that staff morale when it comes to proofing and editing.
Yep. Lots of praise. Thank them for the fact that they're there doing all this, all this great work. And it's going to be your best book yet. And coming up, stay tuned. We're going to have a great training video for you, a little bit hands-on about how to do this.
Absolutely. Any other last final thoughts on proofing and editing? I know we know it's not the most exciting subject in the world, but it is so important for your book for it to be right.
Don't leave it to buy pens at Office Depot or Target. Get the most colorful pens you can. That's the funnest part, is picking out the editing materials and the sticky notes. You need all the cool little sticky notes. So save your money, go to Office Depot, go to Target, go to Walmart, and get the cool stuff.
That's right. Makes it a happier process.
That's right. And we want a happy process.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Well, thank you guys. Don't forget that we've got the checklist that we're going to pair with this as well. There's tons on yearbookhelp.com as well. You can go hunt those down under the training area as well to find some good checklists. In the new advisor field guide, there are checklists. So hunt those down, use those in your classroom, and then don't forget to watch the training video that's coming up right afterwards. But other than that, we are so excited to see what you guys do with proofing and editing in your classrooms. If you have group editing, proof circles, share that with us. Videos, throw that out on the Walsworth Advisors Facebook page. Let us know what you're doing that's successful in this department, because everybody can benefit from it. Everybody needs that stuff.
And don't forget, the first week of December, the applications are due for the Walsworth Signature Scholarship, where you can win $4,500, 2 scholarships.
I don't have anybody who needs one, but all right, you guys, we'll see you on the other side, and come back to that Yearbook web podcast and see us in action.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for tuning in to That Yearbook podcast. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on your preferred platform. Happy yearbooking.